Okay, hello and welcome to today's video. I'm going to be showing you how to prime a canvas. So in the previous videos I showed how to put this canvas stretcher together and to stretch the canvas on it. And I used pre-primed or pre-gessoed canvas, but as I said at the time, I prefer to just use raw canvas in fact and then gesso it myself. Why is it necessary for me to now gesso this? First, a word about what gesso does. I've bought some from my local art store here. So I've got here an offcut of raw canvas. So you can maybe see just on one side it's a sort of beige colour, and then on this other side it's primed or gessoed white. Whenever I say the word prime gesso, I mean the same thing effectively. Technically there is a slight difference, but it doesn't matter. I use the terms to gesso and to prime interchangeably. So normally if I just used unprimed canvas, at this point this would be a beige colour instead of white. And what does priming do? Well, it just prepares the surface. Cotton canvas on its own is extremely absorbent, and I've never felt the need to paint paintings directly onto raw canvas. It's just too absorbent and does funny things. That's why you need a coat to paint onto with your acrylics or oils. I did notice in my art shop actually they do sell primer and gesso. The unique thing about gesso is it's got a bit of a tooth to it, it's a bit grippy. When I do that, it feels a little bit like I can feel it's very, very matte, and it feels a little bit almost like abrasive. Well, if you imagine sandpaper or something like that, that's too strong a word, but it's going a little bit in that direction, so it's not completely smooth and polished. And that's good, because when you paint with your acrylics or your oils, they will bind into that texture and be really solid as a paint layer. Why can't you just use white emulsion paint? Because when you look at it, it looks remarkably similar, as in it's a tub of white paint. There is a reason. It's because the house paint is designed for walls. It's just, I think, to make bulk and density, it's just got loads of cheap ingredients in it. But this stuff is for artists, and it will ensure that your paintings will not fall off the canvas, basically, so that the paint actually sticks to it. If you just use like white house paint, it'll probably flake off after 10 years. So yeah, use the proper stuff, and then your painting will have longevity. Anyway, that's enough talking. Oh yeah, sorry, and also if you've stretched your canvas, almost enough talking but not quite, if you've stretched your canvas with a pre-primed canvas, like this one, then you could just start painting, that'd be fine, but generally they don't really put many layers on. I think this is just a very, very thin layer of gesso, and I like to have more. And also I like to not paint on white. So this is second reason to prime your canvas, is to put down a toned ground. I always paint on anything but white, basically. It's just an unrealistic starting point. So it's better to have something slightly toned. And I very, very often work with a very light grey. And I was just looking at my t-shirt to see if that was, but that's blue. Yeah, so very light grey is what I'm going to be doing today. And there's different ways of choosing a ground colour. Sometimes it might be very dark. If you're doing like a night silhouette scene, you might put down a very dark blue, very dark grey. If it's a painting with a lot of bright yellows in it, so like a flowers, painting of flowers, you could actually coat the whole thing bright yellow to begin with. It's really it's a decision up to you, but really anything is preferable over white. Right, so we can begin the process. The gesso itself is quite firm. I begin by mixing it. This is my favourite mixing rod. It's helpful also to have a palette knife handy for scraping paint back. Yeah, it's a bit of a chalky consistency. That would be one way of describing what the gesso is like. So I'm giving that a good old mix up, just in case any pigment has settled. So I've got a little yogurt pot here, which I'm going to be using to mix up my toned ground. And I've also got, sorry, I'm going to use 3 words interchangeably. So gesso, ground and primer is kind of all the same thing. You can mix acrylics into your ground. So I'm going to now transfer some gesso across to the yogurt pot. Helpful to have paper towel for cleaning. If you watched my previous stretching videos on how to make a stretcher, I've not put in the corner pegs. So I've got a little packet here of corner pegs. I haven't put these in yet because I do them at the very end after I've actually done all my priming, because they add just a little bit extra tension, which is nice. So I'm scooping in enough for good coverage. It's annoying to run out in the middle. You can just put a lid over this and it will last a few days if you find you got too much and you want to do another canvas. It's always good if you're mixing colours, by the way, in quantity. Start with your light colour, white, and then add the darker colours a little bit at a time. It's kind of really hard to do it the other way around. If you've squeezed out too much dark colour and you keep trying to add white to it, it will take a long time and use up lots more paint than necessary. Is that enough? I'll do one more for good luck. Okie dokie, that should be okay. The colours I've got here are black. I've got a warm grey colour as well, and then a raw sienna to give warmth. I'm just going to sort of see how it goes. I'll start with a little bit of warm grey. I really want this to be light. It's going to be a light kind of stony grey colour. And I'm going to warm it up a little bit with a bit of the raw sienna. That's warmed it up quite a lot. Did I want to do that? So I'm going to be adding 2 layers on top here. And quite often I find the second one I have to mix differently because I haven't quite got it right the first time. So I'm going to use that. I think I might want it a bit more grey, but I'll do that on the second coat. It's still going to serve its function of priming. So I've got a quite wide brush here, and it's just a case of getting it on there now. Nothing particularly fancy about this. Just coat it all over your canvas, including the edges, of course. I'll do those in a moment. If you were doing this on raw canvas, you would notice how absorbent it is, because how it soaks in when you apply the gesso. Because this has already been primed, it's flowing on smoothly. So you can see the difference between a toned ground and the white. The toned ground is much nicer to paint on. I'm not particularly bothered about brushstroke directions, I just try and make it pretty random. In a lot of paintings, almost very often all of this actually gets coated over in the end, but the priming does make all the difference because it makes just a really good starting point for your painting. I've mixed up the right amount miraculously. I'm not going to have too much excess. The primer also has a stretching effect, so as it dries out it kind of pulls the canvas slightly tauter. That's why generally I prefer to work onto, I prefer to stretch canvases with raw canvas on the whole, because that effect is even more noticeable then. Right, I need to switch into doing the edges mode. Oh, I've mixed up really just enough. It's going to be like exactly right, almost. I've already managed to get quite a lot of paint on myself. Also, this first layer is not very opaque. I can sort of see brush marks and see the white showing through in some places, but that will vanish when I do the second coat. You might like that texture. I have included, sometimes in paintings I've included a bit of imperfection to give it an interesting background texture. Right, that's the edges done. There's a bit of excess here to brush out. Right, so that is the first layer of primer done. I'll be adding a second layer onto this. I'm not quite sure, I might do it in a different tone, or I might stick with this tone that I've got here. My normal process of creating a painting is to then do a drawing onto the canvas, but I would wait obviously quite a few hours for this to fully dry off before actually beginning the painting. So, oops, that was a bad idea. Here's the finished item. Just needs to dry off, and then it just needs a second coat adding. Okay, so it's now a little bit later on. I've eaten lunch and it's given a chance for my first coat to dry off. It's a pretty warm day today in summertime. I popped a lid over my yogurt pot so that the excess gesso didn't dry. There's not very much in there actually. And yeah, I just wanted to show you a couple of examples. In a small painting like this, I had gessoed this light grey beforehand and then just painted the flower vase on top, so you basically see lots of the background stills. In this case, the colour of the ground is really crucial to get right straight away. I also wanted to show you another thing I do. Sometimes instead of using the gesso, if I have a lot of spare acrylic, I'm just looking at my palettes over there, if I have just happened to have finished a painting and I've got a lot of paint left on the palette, I just mix it all up with a well, I don't use that, I use a smaller palette knife. I use a small palette knife, mix it all up, and if the colour is nice, I just chance it and I just put that colour straight on as a primer layer. And it is different. It's quite handy that I have these. This is just by accident, I have this to hand. Here I can feel this is much more chalky, whereas this, which is just acrylic paint, like standard artist's acrylic, is a smoother finish. This will be fine, it will still be archival. It's perfectly good to paint onto with acrylics. And actually a very similar painting I did is this one here. You can see here that I'll come a bit closer, you can see a lot of the background, and I had done exactly the same with this painting. I just used up some colours that I had on a palette and painted it green and then did my flowers on top of it. I'll show you this one up closer as well. You can see, I can touch that, it's actually much rougher to feel. This approach of using, basically a way of using up surplus paint, is good for smaller canvases, but usually I wouldn't have, it'd be hard to actually cover a full canvas using just leftover paint. That wouldn't really work out well, so then it's best definitely to go to the gesso approach. I'm going to change this colour tone slightly, so I'm going to add in more white gesso. I don't need to stir that again. The gesso is relatively thick in consistency. Stirring it once before a session, so to speak, is fine. So I mustn't be too hasty here. So I've got some of the old colour is still. Oop, you can tell it's not that. It's quite thick. It doesn't really even move if I hold it upside down. And these acrylics I'm using are the flowing type. It's not going to work so well. I do also have tube acrylics, which have got a much stiffer consistency, but they're going to be harder to mix in because when you squeeze a bit out, it just lands as a lump, and then you got to like stir it like crazy, and it probably will not mix in very well. But these ones, this style of paint of acrylic will flow in much better because it's designed to flow. Well, I don't know if it's designed to flow, but it does flow. Anyway, it flows better. I need to think quickly about what I'm doing. So I still wanted it to be a grey, and a warm grey, but not too warm. So start with the grey base. You will see this when it goes onto the canvas. This layer here, I put in a little bit too much raw sienna and it went a little bit too warm. Oh, I think this is fine. Okay, I'm happy with that. I thought I was going to have to do some more adjusting, but I don't think I do. I'm giving it a really thorough mix around because it's irritating if you've got streaks that appear. Mix, 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 mix. So that has made a soft, slightly warmish grey, but not too warm. And that's ready for putting on. So off we go. So it needs quite assertive brushing because the consistency of the base gesso is rather on the thicker side. It's definitely not runny. Colour is quite different. I don't know if that picks up so well on the screen, but it's definitely a colour shift. Okay, so welcome back. It's actually the next day and I'm ready to do my third coat of gesso. And I've already mixed up some gesso in my yogurt pot. It's the same colour as is already on here. But the coverage is not very even and I'm going for an even finish for this painting. And I've mixed up more than last time because I almost ran out, or I did run out really. So, okay. Not much to talk about really, just got to get on with it. Get the gesso onto the canvas. This canvas in total now will have been pre-primed probably once. I think it's only one layer on the pre-primed canvas, and then I've added 3 of my own. So I know that there's at least 4 coats of gesso on this. I'm sure it's considerably more than you'll find done on the commercially bought canvases. So it just means there's a really good foundation to paint on, the best quality possible for your paintings. And this is quite a large canvas. It needs correspondingly quite a lot of gesso. Right, to do the edges. This is why I end up with paint on my knees, obviously. Okay, so there we have it. I can just pick this up using my knife. Let's try and show you. So here is my completed canvas, nicely gessoed. And that just needs to dry and then it'll be ready for drawing on and doing my painting onto. Right, so it's now a little bit later on and the gesso's dried, a nice painting surface prepared. And I'd just like to show you the back of this canvas. I've left the corner pegs till very last, and these came supplied when I bought the stretcher bars. I'm going to take them out of the little packet, and these just look like this. They're little corner pegs. So I have here a tiny hammer, which is really useful. I bought it in a second-hand shop, and the reason is when you're tapping in the corner pegs, there's kind of limited access for hitting with your hammer. So if you had a very big hammer, that would become a problem. So I just work sequentially around with this. So I'm going to pop that one in. So you can see how it just nestles in there. I do the innermost ones first. I could help the sanity of the neighbours a little bit by using my cushion for sound deadening. The reason I leave this till the very last is this is just the final step that adds tension. So there's like 3 tension steps. One is when you're physically pulling the canvas across and stapling it. Another is when you paint the gesso on, even if it's already been a gessoed canvas that you're working with. That just, it sort of tightens everything up. And then the third step is adding these pegs in. It just makes everything nice and taut. So that's the 4 innermost ones completed. And then there's slots which are slightly more outset up close here. And you can see the outset ones will go in like so. These particular ones do have a long edge and a short edge. So I put the long edge against the stretcher bar. I do want this to look neat for a more professional finish. Even the corner pegs are actually nicer. The ones on the ones which come with pre-made canvases are not very impressive. These ones are much nicer. So make sure everything's really hammered in well. You don't want them to fall out. Okay, so the result of that is a very nice tensioned canvas. That feels really good. It's exactly like I want it to be. You can see the pegs there sitting in the corners. On all 4 corners. And that just about wraps it up then. So you've joined me for the whole journey of building up your canvas using stretcher bars and the cross pieces and your own canvas fabric, and then your own customized coloured gesso ground. All that you now need to do is a painting on top of it. Thank you very much for watching.